Hello, and welcome to the Meet Mediocrity Podcast, Season 4, Episode 8. Today's episode is about networking and carrying on conversations. Now, why did I decide to come up with today's topic of networking and carrying on conversations? Really simple. Because it's not easy and it's not fun. And I have to be honest with you, most people who know me personally would say, "Oh, Mitch, he's great at carrying on a conversation. So social, so easy to speak with." Look, I think most people would say those sorts of things about me. Truth is, if I know I'm going to a dinner with, it could be 2 or 3 or 4 people, it could be a business function with 100 people. My first reaction is usually, I don't really want to go. I have to be switched on. I have to be on my best behavior. It's especially hard work when you don't have a plan and a purpose. And over the years, I've come upon a few easy things that help me plan and have a purpose for those business functions. And it just makes them a lot easier. It makes them more effective, makes them more meaningful, makes them have more of a purpose down the road, but it also makes it easier to just go. So I'm going to share a story with you. This is a story about a dinner party that I had at my house a while ago, probably 10 years ago. And it's a story about a friend of mine named Gary, who is a journalist, works in the news industry, and a cousin of mine named Ellen and Gary were sitting next to each other at dinner, and there was about 10, 12 people. It was a sit-down dinner, so it wasn't a stand-around cocktail party type of thing. It was go over to the kitchen. We have an island in the kitchen. We laid out all the food. People took their plates. They filled up their plates with food. They came back to the dining room table. They sat down. We all sat down and we ate. And Gary and Ellen were in a deep conversation. It had to last at least half the dinner. And they were huddled over. They were talking softly. They were smiling. They were engaged. And I'm like, wow, they're really hitting it off. The dinner ends. People start to leave. Gary and his wife leave. Ellen and her husband kind of stick around. They're like the last ones hanging around. We're cleaning up dishes. Ellen is actually with me at the kitchen sink. And she says, "That Gary, what an interesting person." And I said, "Really? You seem to be hitting it off. What was it about Gary that was so interesting?" And she's like, "I can't put my finger on it. He's just such an interesting person." And I said, "Did he tell you some stories about his job, some interesting interviews or assignments or stories that he did? I mean, he's actually won awards for his journalism." She's like, "Not specifically." So I said, "So is it something personal? Did Gary tell you about his family or his vacation spot that he likes to go to, or some of his hobbies, something about Gary that was super interesting to you?" She's like, "Nope, nothing like that." And I said, "So what is it that you and Gary were talking about?" She's like, "We were talking about my job." I'm like, "Oh, Ellen, you were talking about your job?" She's like, "Yes, he has such interesting questions about trips I've been on and projects I've worked on and people I've worked with. And he asks such insightful questions that it seemed like he actually knew me and knew my business, because he would ask follow-up questions and he seemed so interested." I said, "So you don't really know anything about Gary, other than the fact that he likes to allow you to speak about yourself." I didn't say that, by the way, because Ellen would have hated me. But in my head, I said, interesting. Gary is the most interesting person because he allowed Ellen to talk about herself. I tell that story because it's a true story. Names changed, story factual. And I tell that story because it's a bit of my new go-to when I'm setting myself up or getting myself ready to go to a business function or a dinner or an event or a lunch with people that aren't like my friends or family or my chosen hangout people. And here's the formula. The formula I use is to figure out ways to make the conversation about the other person and to learn something interesting, I would start by going to these functions and say, I'm going to learn something that I don't know about one person at that function that I don't know already. And if you start there, it's going to quickly build to learning lots of things about a person or lots of things about multiple people. But keep it simple. Start with one person. Let me learn something that I don't know about them today. And how do we do that? Well, there's a few ways to do that. This is going to sound a little creepy, but I love stalking people on social media because it's one thing to go on LinkedIn and say, oh, I know where they went to university or I know what their college major was. That's cool, but that's not super cool. What's super cool is really going on to social media and really learning what makes this person tick. Are they posting lots of pictures of their children, their hobby, places they like to go, social issues that are important to them? You really get to learn a lot about a person by what they post. So I always like to stalk people. Not everyone is stalkable. Some people don't post on social media or their accounts are private. But even by Googling them, you can learn something. Did they just run a 5K? There's a million things you can learn when you find that. Now, sometimes you go to business events and you don't know who you're going to hang out with. So you can't really research them. Whether you research someone or not, there's a useful trick that I like to use. And always ask open-ended questions. But let me go one step beyond that. Ask pointed and unusual questions. For example, I might say, let me ask you a question. Love to hear your thoughts on this. If you could have dinner with any person in the history of time, who would you have dinner with and why? And run with that. Hear what they have to say. Ask follow-up questions. You can be prepared with your answer to that question as well, but it's really about the other person. And why did they choose a particular person and why? Or if you could snap your fingers and be anywhere on the planet Earth right now, where would you be and why? Again, you can have a whole conversation around that, and you can learn a lot about the person. Now, why am I doing this? A couple of reasons. A, it makes the whole social event, the whole networking event, so much easier because you're not sitting there switched on trying to think of things to talk about and trying to show how smart you are. You're just having a conversation about something that is interesting to the person that you're speaking with. Secondly, you can learn so much about the person and you can draw on those learnings in future connections. You know, you walk into a meeting and you see someone who told you a whole story about how they wish they could have dinner with Nelson Mandela or Mick Jagger. It doesn't matter. You can then, next time you see them, reference it in a meaningful way. I know you wish you were having dinner with LeBron James. I see he scored 30 points last night against the Bucks, and the Lakers won. Again, boom, connection, and you can see where that takes you. So I think about Gary, and I think about the dinner at my house with Ellen, and he's a journalist. And so he's naturally asking questions and inquiring. But we can do the same thing. We can become those investigative journalists by asking interesting questions, carrying on a conversation, and learning something about someone. The other thing I do, you're going to think I'm a little bit geeky, but I always, after the dinner, I write down a page of notes. Who did I meet? What was the tidbit I learned? After you have those networking events, take some notes. Put them somewhere you can find them and reference them because it becomes part of your portfolio about the people that you're networking with. This isn't all about making relationships and all about earning new business. This isn't just a business thing. I've got 4 sons. Now, I think about like when they're going out on a date with a girl. And the advice I always give them is make sure you don't talk too much about yourself. Make sure you let the girl talk about herself. In fact, make sure she speaks mostly about herself. If she asks you a question, of course, answer it, but leave the floor open. Ask open-ended questions about whatever to find out what she's interested in, and then show that you're interested. These kind of networking skills open-ended questions, being an investigative journalist, learning about the person, taking notes, drawing on those notes for the next time you meet them, are all skills that make us much, much better at networking and carrying on conversations. So there you have the Meet Mediocrity Podcast, Season 4, Episode 8 around networking. And until next time, I ask that you continue to stay safe, be healthy, have fun, keep smiling, get outdoors, get outside, enjoy the fresh air. Take care, everyone.